You're listening to the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, your host, Ben Eagle. Please remember to subscribe to the show wherever you are listening. Hello everyone and welcome to episode 224 of the Meet the Farmers podcast with me, Ben Eagle. Today we're in Staffordshire meeting arable and beef farmer Andrew Court. Andrew runs the family's 275-acre mixed farm with his mother and brother. The rotation includes winter wheat, spring oats, spring peas and winter barley, as well as oilseed rape. He studied agricultural engineering at Harper Adams before returning to the family farm. Andrew is also involved with the Institute of Agricultural Engineers, and he's the new chair of the Farmers Club Under 35s Committee starting in 2024. And he's also part of the Just Farmers Network. Andrew, welcome to Meet the Farmers. Thanks for coming on.
Hey, thank you for inviting me, Ben. It's a real honour.
Oh, it's great to have you here. Let's dive straight in. Give us a bit of an introduction to the farm, maybe some history of it as well, because it's I think it's from your mum's side of the family.
Absolutely. So, yes, as you say, it didn't come down my father's side. It comes from my mum's side of the family. The farm was originally my great uncle and his family were tenants, sort of beginning the turn of the century, in the 1900s. And that passed down. And then in 1956, the estate that the farm was part of went bankrupt and they were forced to sell. So my grandfather, who was looking to move off his own tenant farm at the time, was having a conversation with my great uncle. And he said, you know what, this land is better than people think it is. You should put an offer in. So my grandparents put an offer in and bought the farm in 1956. They came here. They were predominantly dairy farmers. They'd been dairy farmers where they were before, as well as being a landlord of a pub. And my grandfather was very keen on his vegetables. During the war, he went round doing people's vegetable gardens because he was too young to enlist.
Hang on, I've just got to pause you on the fact that they were dairy farmers and they ran a pub. Were they just massive gluttons for punishment?
No, well, I don't know. I mean, the pub's still going. It was an absolutely beautiful pub. The pub was on one side of the road, then the farm on the other, and then between the farm and all the fields was a river with one wooden bridge to access all the fields, and that generally washed away every winter. So they had to rebuild a bridge every spring. So you can understand why they decided they wanted to move.
Yeah.
So yeah, when they came to the farm, it was a really mixed enterprise. We're very close to Swinnerton Army Camp. So after the war, it was a munitions factory during the war, and they bought a lot of the buildings off the camp and put them up. So we had a shower block as a chicken house, and again there were some offices as well. That was a chicken house, and an old bomb storage unit. That was a cattle shed. So yeah, when they came, it was very much completely mixed, hugely diverse. The dairy cows were the main enterprise, but there was always a few pigs, there was sheep, there was potatoes, there was the whole of the bottom lawn. As you can imagine, that this is actually a former hunting lodge, so it has a very grand garden.
Okay.
And the whole bottom lawn was down to vegetables. Just if they could do it, they were doing it, basically.
Wow.
And then they had my aunt, and then my mum, and then my uncle. Through the decades, they then continued to streamline and specialise, as everybody did in those times. They bought a second farm and ended up with a system where the dairy cows were on this farm, and a little bit of crop, and then the calves went down to the other farm to be raised as beef animals. And then they sadly passed away, and my uncle took over, and during the dairy crisis of 2010, he came out of cows and replaced the cows with suckler cows so that he could just continue with the beef line. And then just before COVID, my uncle is getting on, wants to scale down. We were biting at the bit, so to speak. So it was arranged that that we purchased the family farm and took over right at the beginning of lockdown in April 2020.
Wow.
So whilst most people were not sure what to do with themselves and doing a lot of home DIY, we were suddenly setting up a farm in what turned out to be one of the driest summers of the century so far. So it was a really enlightening process.
Yeah. Where did you get the farming bug first of all? I assume it was through your uncle.
So as a kid, I didn't really have very much involvement with the farm. I had a toy farm that my parents built me for my 4th birthday, and my grandmother presented me with a pedal tractor, which was a replica of the big one my uncle had just bought for my 3rd birthday. And he used to pedal around the patio with that. But other than that, I didn't really have much involvement with farming until my grandmother passed away when I was 12. And then, because my uncle was on his own, my mum started coming up to help. And in the summer holidays, she'd drag us along with her.
Okay.
And very soon I became gate boy, as everybody does. And was desperate to learn to drive a tractor. So right at the end of harvest, I was allowed to jump in a tractor in a completely empty field and just have a play. And that carried on for a little while, and I was allowed to reverse a trailer around some bales, and I just sort of basically taught myself how to drive a tractor, and that's where my real bug for agriculture came from, and it's just grown from there. It's just been an unearthed passion, so to speak.
Yeah, but I mean, did you think that you'd go into something other than farming?
When I was really young, my real passion was for designing things.
Yep.
And that was inspired by a cartoon of the Wind in the Willows that we used to watch. I was absolutely enamored with the caravan that they used to go traveling around in. When I was 6 and at school, I actually put that when I grow up I wanted to be a gypsy, because I was so enamored by this caravan. But that led me to wanting to design things and build things out of wood, which my dad encouraged me to do. So actually, growing up, I thought I was going to be an engineer. And right the way through my school years, my parents said, especially when I found agriculture, that by all means, if you want to go into farming in the future, then go into farming. But we would suggest that you do engineering, because that will allow you to open many other doors should you decide not to, and you've got that fallback, which is very sensible advice. So I did physics and design and technology and all that sort of stuff at school. But when I came to choosing universities, the opportunity came to go to Harper Adams to study agriculture and mechanical engineering all in one. So it was absolutely fantastic.
Okay, tell us a little bit more about your time at Harper.
Oh, I mean, I think my time at Harper was perhaps a bit boring compared to most people's. But it was a really, really good experience. You learn so many different aspects of engineering that you perhaps wouldn't at other universities, because agriculture as an engineering industry actually encompasses far more disciplines than automotive or aeronautical. There's so many different aspects, because the machines are designed to operate in multiple different environments, not just one or two controlled environments, which are very easy to replicate. So you would study hydraulics, you would study robotics, you'd study electronics, you'd study soil science, you'd study building design and civil engineering. It's such a huge plethora of different topics within agricultural engineering. Now, I found it all completely fascinating. And then the placement year as well, actually, you get a bit daunted. Oh, I don't want to do this, but it sets you up so well for going into a working environment after university, and already puts your foot through the door at some big businesses. I was very, very fortunate. I went to Case New Holland's plant in Basildon.
Wow.
as a field test engineer. So the job description was basically to take prototype tractors which were coming through the development process and put them out with farmers to gain feedback and see where the faults were, but also to try and replicate some real life scenarios and test specific aspects of the tractor that they were trying to improve. So PTO engagement was my real hot topic when I was there.
This episode is being supported by our primary sponsor, Howden Rural, which is the new name for A-Plan Rural. The Howden team shares my passion for giving a voice to farmers, and we are both driven to raise the profile of farming voices to a wider audience. Howden Rural do a lot of work on social media themselves, sharing farming accounts and farming stories. They have a rural community blog which shares farmers' experiences. They also support a growing number of initiatives that champion UK farmers, including this podcast. So a big thank you to Howden Rural for supporting Meet the Farmers. Let's widen this out to tech and machinery sort of going forward now. What are you most excited about that going forward?
I think there's two sort of areas with technology in agricultural engineering that are the hot topics at the moment. I think the first one is fuel or fuel sources. Whilst electrical cars are quite viable because the range is so good, the power requirements for a tractor and the variation in the loading means that's possibly not the future direction for tractors. Telehandlers are a different story because whilst they do a lot of work, they're sort of on off. They're just pottering around a yard or something, and there's plenty of opportunities to charge them. Whereas if you want to go ploughing for 8 to 9 hours, there's no battery in the world that can currently cope with that. So things like hydrogen, people believe hydrogen is the way forward, but the technology is not there yet, and the safety aspects aren't there. As someone said to me 10 years or so ago, that what people have got to remember is that if you go baling in somewhere like Cambridgeshire, where it's quite flinty in places, and you get a spark in the baler, you're not going to try and save the baler. You're just going to run because you've got a small nuclear bomb in the field. I think hydrogen will come, but I think it's a long way away. And I think that New Holland have recently launched a methane system, the first production methane tractor, and that is out and about working on farms, and the methane can be derived from your cattle's poo, and the technology's there. So I think that's going to be the first one where tractors go. I think telehandlers will be battery powered, but I think tractors will go in a different direction. So I think that's the first real interesting thing coming in agriculture. And the other topic I think is robotics. I think robotic and self-driving tractors are coming. I think that the practicalities haven't been fully thought out yet. We're very good at in our industry at thinking, well, we'll think 10 steps ahead. We'll skip to the fully autonomous machine that drives everywhere and does everything by itself. But for me, I don't think that's quite practical, because with the best will in the world, if you're collecting bales, for example, the machine can log where it dropped the bale, so it can so it should theoretically know where the bale is to go and pick it up. But if it's a round bale, it could roll down the hill, it could go anywhere. So I think there's still a need for drivers in certain circumstances, and that's why I feel the hands-free hectare project, which is being run at Harper Adams, that's sort of the nice middle ground, and I think that project has a really big future.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of excitement in that, I think, for lots of people. Let's bring this back to your story on the farm. Take us back to, I suppose, that time when your uncle says, "Yep, time to move on." You're taking the farm on. What does that first year look like? What are you doing? What's on the ground? What's happening on the ground? And who's doing what? How are you working together?
So we actually knew this was going to happen a year or two in advance, because there's some complex things to sort out. And I was actually recovering from ill health at the time. So it was the perfect opportunity to, as I recovered, to sit down and look at things and decide what was the right thing to do. My brother was working for my uncle, so he didn't really have the time. So I basically took that step back and said, well, what's happening in the future and what do we need to think about? So back in 2018, 2019, the Sustainable Farming Incentive, or SFI, and the Environmental Land Management Scheme, otherwise known as ELMS, were being talked about. And it was really looking at trying to force farmers down a particular path, potentially by penalising them on their subsidy. That was what was being talked about in the initial stages. That hasn't transpired, fortunately. It's a much more encouraging path. But when we were reading all these things and talking to other farmers in the industry, some of whom were sitting on these panels, advising on these strategies, they said, you know what, you should really consider going down the more direct drilling routes. And that was really where we started. We said, well, why would we go out and buy a conventional plow and a power harrow and seed drill combination, rather than starting off as we mean to go on, because we'd only have to swap them in 5 years' time and potentially lose quite a bit of money if the market's being flooded by all these second-hand machinery. So we said from the outset we were going to go more arable, because that seemed like the right thing to do. And then we were going to do it as sustainably as possible. So we started on the basis of direct drilling, and then it sort of naturally evolved from there. As we were setting up, we were approached by Severn Trent, who said, did you know that you're in a groundwater catchment zone, which means that they extract water out of a borehole in our area, and they have to deal with the nitrates out of the soil leaching into that water. They then have to treat it. So they said, we've got some funding to pay for you to put cover crops in, which is basically a plant between your two main crops, whether it be your wheat and your barley, for instance, and that absorbs the plants absorb all the nitrates to reduce the level of treatment that Severn Trent have to give to the water, and also it makes the nitrates then available for our next crop, so it saves us money on fertilizer. So we've naturally evolved down this regenerative farming route. So we started with the crops, and as you mentioned in your intro, we grow quite a wide range for such a small farm.
Yep.
And then it's evolved to include cover crops. We now run trials and training days alongside our suppliers on cover crops, and I'm asked to speak quite widely about them. But also we then began to integrate our beef side of the business into that. And we're on this journey to create a sustainable and biologically dynamic soil and farming system.
Yeah. Just tell us a little bit more about how the beef and the arable enterprises sort of work together. Because your beef, as I understand it, you're grass finishing and you're mostly just out on permanent pasture.
Absolutely. So we do integrate grass into our rotation. So when we feel that soil needs a rest, we'll take that field out and plant grass in it for 2 or 3 years. We're actually experimenting with a temporary herbal ley this time. So instead of just having your grasses and your clovers, we're planting all sorts of different herbs such as chicory and plantain, which have other benefits to the animal. We do that for 2 or 3 years to rest the soil and really build the soil's biological nature, and that will be used predominantly for our silage. But we do have 50 acres of what is termed permanent pasture, which is grass that can only ever be grass. It can't be cereals. And we graze our animals outside as much as possible in that system, but they do come in the winter, and that creates a lot of manure. We can use the straw from our wheat and barley to bed them, which creates this manure, which we can then recycle out onto the arable land as a natural fertilizer. We're looking at taking that a stage further, so rather than spreading it as manure, we keep it for a year or two and convert it into compost, which is even more nutritious. But also the cover crops. One method of destruction, so to speak, of the cover crop is to graze them. Animals are the most efficient carbon converters in the world. So we want to get that plant from a living organism through to a carbon source that will feed the bacteria and fungi that exist within the soil. And one of the most efficient ways of doing that, as I say, is to graze those plants. So we're looking slowly and steadily at integrating the animals into grazing those plants as well. It's all a very balanced system, and we're trying to be as self-sufficient as we possibly can, because that helps us with our weed pressures. Because if we import straw or something like that, it can carry or fodder, it can carry a weed burden with it, which is then something that we have to spend money on pesticides to control, which we don't want. And it saves us having to destroy the cover crops with herbicides or a mechanical system, such as a plow or a power harrow or something like that. It's just a very nice, well balanced system, and it gives us another income stream, which is always a positive.
Meet the Farmers is brought to you by RuralPod Media, the only podcast production agency to specialise in the rural sector. We're on a mission to make rural stories mainstream and help businesses, organisations and communities like you tell your story through podcasting. Podcasting is a fantastic way of connecting with your audience, whoever that might be, getting your message out there and networking with leaders in your niche. RuralPod Media can help you by launching your new podcast or helping you with the technical side. We also provide podcast training and an audit service if you already have a podcast, you're not sure where to take it to next. For more information or to book a call, visit ruralpodmedia.co.uk. That's ruralpodmedia.co.uk. Now, you're a 275-acre mixed farm, and you sort of sit outside this rhetoric of some people who say, oh, you've got to get bigger and specialise and take on lots of contracted land, or you've got to be very, very small and niche. You're sitting in the middle as, a sort of small to mixed farm. How are you making it work?
It's a good question. When we were setting up the business, I did an awful lot of financial calculations and working out what our costs would be. So one of the biggest costs in setting up a system is the capital investments in machinery, whether it's brand new or secondhand. It costs a fortune. Yeah. I was thinking in the car earlier, the tractor that we've got on the farm, some Aston Martins are cheaper than that tractor. It's just to give listeners an idea as to how expensive some of this stuff is. You could be driving an Aston Martin or a Ferrari for less money than a lot of tractors on the roads. It's all about making sure that you're being cost effective. Do you need the size of tractor that you're purchasing? Do you need this? Do you need that? And really, attention to detail in the finances makes it justifiable. Don't get me wrong, we would like to expand. Another 100 or 200 acres would make the farm probably its most viable or most efficient and cost-effective system. But we are turning a working profit with the system that we are running on the scale that we are running. And it's just by being very financially savvy and actually questioning everything that's going on and thinking, do I need to do that? Don't I need to do that?
Okay. You also came into farming when is an easy time, but over the last few years, you came in straight into COVID. Then, of course, you had the massive fertilizer price increase as a result of the war in Ukraine. What have your challenges been, and how have you sort of got through those?
I think COVID was very much sort of business as usual, because it's a small family farm, as you say. I'm interacting within my bubble. There was no worries with staff or anything like that. It was just a case of crack on and not do any sort of external activities, so to speak. Yeah, COVID was not an issue for us. The costs, the war in Ukraine, the spiraling material costs because of HS2 and other big building projects going on, that's had a real impact on the development of our business. So fertilizer, we are gradually scaling down our fertilizer, and fortunately, whilst the fertilizer price went up, so too did the sale prices of our grain. So that sort of offset itself. We were simply turning over more money for the same level of profit, so to speak. But material inflation, when we started, we wanted to go into pigs and have a bed and breakfast pig unit. And when that project started, an all singing, all dancing shed would have been £250,000 roughly.
Yeah.
But by the time planning permission was granted and we got through the 18-month process, it became £400,000.
Oh wow!
Which is a staggering increase in costs, and the profitability of the scheme hadn't increased by the same amount, so the payback time had almost doubled. So it wasn't financially viable. So it's been quite restrictive in that sense, with the cost of materials and things like that.
Let's go on to your sort of wider interests, and you're keen on. I mean, sort of sticking within ag, still sticking on that side, but you're keen on professional development. Run us through some of the things that you've done so far, and why you do this. Why do you think it's important?
I think it's easier to do the why first. So, having come through an engineering degree, there's lots of professional development within that industry, within the multiple different disciplines. So I was already taking part in engineering style professional development events, and I enjoyed them. It was a good way of keeping in with the industry and keeping tabs on sort of the wider profile of what was going on within your specific area, within different companies and things like that. So when it came to farming and I was basically having a complete change of career, I'd not really had the education in farming. So it was necessary for me to get out there and learn stuff. So I sort of approached it in the same way that you would professional development and going out. I've been on courses at Harper and at a Farm ED in Gloucestershire. And I've been to webinars and read articles, and it's just about keeping tabs on everything. But I'm also working towards a chartership in environmentalism, which is currently offered by the Institute of Agricultural Engineers, but is available through other institutes.
Yeah.
Well, you and I, Ben, we're both Oxford Farming Conference Inspire scholars. So and that this year is sponsored by the Institute of Agriculture and Horticulture, and they are trying to set up a more controlled version of professional development within agriculture, and it very much aligns with my thoughts and feelings that even in farming you need to keep pushing and developing, because otherwise how will your business?
Absolutely. You're also very freshly announced as the new chair of the under 35s group at the Farmers Club. When did you first get involved with the Farmers Club? Why and what's it about? I'm not sure whether we've talked about it much on the podcast before.
So the Farmers Club is a space in London. It's very close to Big Ben in Whitehall, where members who come from all areas of the agricultural sector can meet and eat and drink and be merry, network and stay. It's a safe place for farmers to stay in London in a nice central location for not a comparably large sum of money. That was always the principle. It was a meeting space for farmers in the capital when it was founded. I became involved again when I was looking for ways of becoming chartered. I came across a branch meeting of a local institute, and they'd had somebody from the Farmers Club speak about the club, and I thought, oh, what's this? So I googled it and I found it, and I saw that they got as was an under 30s section at the time. And I was going through the events, and it was basically they had a couple of farm walks a year in different regions, and they also had a number of dinners, which meant going to London but networking with farmers from around the country of a similar age, and not just farmers, but vets, farm accountants,
Yep.
all sorts. It's a really diverse group of people. So I emailed the secretary, and she very kindly invited me along as a guest to experience it and see what I thought of it. So I did that, and I met my girlfriend that night
Oh, wow.
for the first time. And then I joined right at the start of COVID, and I've been to a number of dinners. I've then joined the committee, and we now and risen through the ranks, as you say, to chairman for 2024. And we just run a huge array of different events for our members. Some of it is educational. We have a fund specifically for education of our members, and that is offering professional development style talks and training days on all different aspects of farming, whether it be marketing, business management, succession. We've done one on regenerative farming. And then, as I say, we've got the farm walks, we've got networking events, just casual drinks. And it's just really utilizing that space for people up and down the country to come and experience and enjoy farming and talk about farming. It's a really worthwhile organization, and I do owe the club a lot, because my girlfriend recently turned into my fiance. So it's a really good space
for that as well. Yeah,
thank you very much.
If that sounds of interest to anyone, which I'm sure it probably will to some listeners, how do they get involved?
So initially I would Google the Farmers Club, and it should bring up the website. There is a contact us page and the membership forms if you do want to get signed up. But yeah, it's open to everybody, but the under 35s are going strong. And I'd encourage everybody to check it out.
Just a little more about our primary sponsor, Howden Rural, which is the new name for A-Plan Rural. Same people, different name. Howden Rural provide bespoke insurance cover for farms and estates. This could be for anything from tractors and machinery to a new exciting diversification venture. So for more information, visit howdeninsurance.co.uk/rural.
Now, you've got a lot going on at the moment with your various hats, so I'm guessing there's not, let alone planning a wedding now as well. I'm guessing there's not much more you could do at the moment, but looking into the longer term, what are those opportunities for you on the farm or otherwise? What are you most looking forward to over the next sort of decade or so?
I think that the key one for the farm is that we do need to expand a bit. Whether that be through contracting, share farming agreements, or whatever it might be, we certainly have the capacity with what we've got and set up now to really bring down the costs of production by taking on more land. HS2 has actually been a real roadblock to that, although we're not on the path of HS2 for stage 2 of HS2. All of the local estate has had its tenant farms carved up, and they've had to seek extra land to maintain the tenancies, and that's really stitched up the rental market in the area. But with the government's announcement that that's now being stopped, hopefully more opportunities will come. So that would be our main goal, sort of farming wise, to develop. To grow a bit, and also to continue to improve our work-life balance. It is a really big thing in farming. I think that there is a transition from farming just being a complete way of life and everything that you breathe, to being, okay, no, the farm is our business, and we need that personal time, because there's so much more pressure or instant pressure on all of us these days with the rise of technology and instant messaging and things like that. It's very easy to create these very high pressure situations, which our grandparents would never have had. They just sort of get on with it. They wouldn't panic about what the weather forecast is saying or anything like that, because it wouldn't be there. So I think that those are the farm's goals. Personally, as you say, get married. I'd really like to do a Nuffield scholarship in the future. but I also would like to finish my basis and FACS qualifications, which are my pesticides advisory qualification, and the same for fertilizers. Just so I've got that under my belt. I just want to be stable and happy and have a great farming business.
Sounds like a good plan. We're going to start to move towards the end. We've got the quick questions first of all, which are a bit of fun. Your all-time favourite song?
I'm glad I listened to other people's answers in the last few days, because I think that after last weekend, where we were dancing and celebrating with our friends our engagement, it'd have to be any S Club 7 song, but Brilliant. Probably particularly Reach or Bring It All Back to You.
Amazing. And all-time favourite book?
I probably have to go down the author route here. I'm a stickler for classic crime fiction, so either Dorothy L. Sayers or Agatha Christie, or even P.G. Wodehouse, Jeeves and Wooster.
Brilliant. Yeah, love it.
Those would be my top picks.
Excellent. And the final questions, Andrew, your message for the public, what is it?
This is my most tricky one. Probably in a similar vein to other guests that really do question what you're seeing in the media or what you're purchasing in the shop. Things are manipulated sometimes, particularly on social media and things like that. So really just question and ask the question. If you see a story about farming, or if you pick up a product and wonder where it's from, can you trust that? Because we have the highest welfare standards in the world. When you see something that's a bit questionable, was it actually filmed in this country, for instance? But farming is a brilliant industry, and if you have any questions, do approach your farmer.
And your message for your fellow farmers?
I'd say keep up the good work. Farming is changing, and we perhaps do need to change. I realise that we do go through very long periods of different fashions. In the 80s, we were trying to make everything big and large scale, and now we're trying to change our farming systems again. And I can understand why people might see particularly regenerative farming as a fad, but honestly, your farm is your farm, your soil is your soil. That just because your neighbour's doing it doesn't mean it's going to work for you. But do question if you do need to continue working in this way for the long term and for what you want for generations to come.
Yeah, it does seem like more and more farmers are having that conversation with themselves. Finally, your recommendation for a blog, podcast or social media account to follow, which can be farming or non-farming.
So I think I have 3 Instagrams to suggest. The first would be Castle Belties, which a friend of mine runs. She and her family raise belted Galloways, and they just started doing that through COVID. Just you'd follow the story of their Galloways, and then off the back of that, they've launched a beef box business. But it's really good fun to watch. Batemore Farms in Norfolk, I've been following them for a while. That's really good fun, really honest view of farming, and she's doing absolutely amazing things. And then BBC weather presenter Becky Wood is her partner is a farmer as well, so her Instagram account is full of everything. She's got weather updates for you, which is great for farmers. She's got milking updates at 4 a.m. on a Sunday, and she also does a bit of horse riding and has dogs as well. So there's something for everybody on her account. So those would be my 3 recommendations.
Super shout outs. We'll put all those in the show notes. Andrew, that's it. It's flown by. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast, telling us about your story, and good luck for everything going forward. And congrats on the engagement as well.
No, thank you very much, Ben. It's been an absolute pleasure.
That is it for today. We will leave it there. A big thank you to my guest, Andrew Court, for coming on the show. Thank you very much for listening. Thanks to our primary podcast sponsor, Howden Rural Insurance, who support the show. Without their support, the show couldn't really happen. Any extra information is in the show notes. Any links mentioned today, they're also there. Next time will be our final episode of the year, and I'll be joined by a brand new panel of guests for our big farming quiz of the year, when we'll reflect back on the year in farming. Really looking forward to that. But yeah, cannot believe how quickly this year has flown. For now, though, I'm Ben Eagle. This has been Meet the Farmers. Thank you very much for listening, and I hope you all have a great week.